Good morning and welcome to this, the 19th meeting of 2013 of the European and External Relations Committee. Can I make the normal request that mobile phones and electronic equipment are switched off? Could I welcome Patricia Ferguson back to committee? Thank you for coming, Patricia. And can also welcome Stuart McMillan, who is the EU Rapporteur for the Local Government Committee. Welcome, Stuart. Before I move to agenda item 1, I just wanted to make a wee quick statement, a wee tribute to one of our colleagues who is not with us, Helen Eadie. I think it's appropriate, given the work that Helen did on this committee, for this committee to formally recognise on the record Helen's work to this committee, but not only Helen's work to this committee, but her work outside the committee. I think I will not ever hear the word Bulgaria and not think fondly of Helen and the work she did to really promote and raise awareness of that whole region. Certainly, I read the tribute that her son-in-law had written the other night, where he had explained that in Helen's early life, her first job, she was sacked because it was in a laundry and it was a female workforce who weren't being treated very well with her employer, so she tried to unionise the workforce to support the women that were working there, and she was sacked for that. And I think, as I said in the wee book of remembrance, when I read about Helen's life, it was a life very, very, very well lived, and obviously a life, given her past and her crusades and her campaigns, very, very worthwhile living as well. So for this committee, and especially for me as a convener, I would really like to just put on record my tribute to Helen and wish her family and her friends and her colleagues my sincerest condolences. And I believe some other members of the committee want to say something quickly too. Patricia?
Thank you, Convener, and thank you very much on behalf of the Labour Group for your kind words. I think your comments are absolutely right, and Helen was one of those people for whom Europe wasn't just an abstract concept, it was something that actually could help to make the lives of the people she cared about better. And her work in Europe was entirely around those kinds of themes. Helen was also a woman who espoused a great many campaigning ideas, but with Helen it was never a here today and gone tomorrow approach. These were campaigns that she pursued for years, doggedly, and I think from my own experience her support for the workers at Remploy over probably 30 years is second to none, and she will be sorely missed.
Amy?
Well, I'd also like to say that the shock of Helen's death is very traumatic, I think, and our thoughts obviously go out to her family and friends. She epitomised the good side of politics, as far as I'm concerned. She epitomised the right reasons for people being in politics. Honesty and goodness shone from her face, and she had an obvious wish to help other people, and a hugely obvious wish for a prosperous and peaceful Europe. And I will personally miss her very much indeed.
Lee?
Convener, when I joined this committee, I think I came in right into the middle of a ding-dong argument, I think it was, about Scotland's position in Europe, so forcefully put by Helen at the committee. And I thought to myself at that point, Jings, this is going to be different from the audit committee. And it certainly has been. Opinions sincerely held and forcefully put, I think, were extremely welcome from Helen, and I personally enjoyed the relationship I had with her at this committee. We shared many interests, particularly the Balkans, and particularly in the whole digital agenda and so on and so forth. And it's at those wee points over having a cup of coffee that sometimes you develop relationships with people that last. And I will forever be thankful for that opportunity to have met Helen Eadie and to have worked with her at this committee, and I'll sincerely miss her.
Thank you. Is there any other committee members want to say something? Claire?
Sorry, my apologies, our train was delayed this morning. I will remember Helen for her absolute passion for those areas that she was involved in. Patricia mentioned her support for Remploy, but her support for social enterprise and her absolute passion for extending that across Scotland was evident. And she's someone who took her politics to a truly international level, and her seeking social justice, not just in this country but across Europe, especially in Bulgaria, which she obviously loved, will be remembered by many people. And something that will always bring a smile to my face is her being tickled pink when I admired her electric brew nail varnish in this committee, which I think her grandchildren had some part in. A lovely lady.
Yes,
I had the pleasure of meeting Helen for the first time when I joined the Scottish Parliament and in this committee in particular, and I said to her, "You need to look after me." And after a couple of committee meetings, she says, "I think you need to look after me." She was a wonderful person. She always had a smile, a very gentle, friendly smile, always made you at ease, made me feel at ease. And she always had time for you. So, you know, I would stop her in the corridor and say, "What do you think about this issue?" And she would actually stand and explain what she thinks about the issue thoroughly. So she made sure you understand her point of view as well. That's very few people have time for people these days, and it didn't have to be just purely business. It could be, you know, you could ask her a question about anything in life, and she would make the time to actually explain and give you her point of view, which was always very valued. And I will miss her. She was a great lady, and I'm sure her family will miss her.
Rod?
I obviously endorse the comments that other members of the committee have made. I didn't get to know Helen terribly well until I joined this committee, but her enthusiasm for Europe was absolutely paramount. Obviously, like others, Bulgaria and Helen are inextricably linked in my mind. In my discussions with her, I always found her a very warm and considerate person, and as Willie has said, I think she exemplified kind of the better things about politics. When you think about Helen, you didn't think about a partisan political animal. You thought about somebody who cared passionately about things, and she will be sadly missed.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to say a quick word?
Alan Boyle, Westlife Enterprise. Helen was the founder of our organisation back in the early 1980s, following the devastation of coal mining demise and the effect on pit villages, and absolute passion for the belief in people. And she recruited me in and inspired me to get involved in doing something which I've now enjoyed for over 30 years, or coming up for 30 years, I should say, and got my first involvement in European structural funds. And it's particularly poignant that Helen was the first organisation in Scotland to get an open European structural fund application passed. This was back in the days when you sent your application on, basically, it was blank sheets of paper straight to the Commission, and they reckon they could have filled a football field with the number of applications. And Helen was getting irate that she hadn't heard from them, and she got a form letter which said, "We have received your application and it is under consideration." And that wasn't good enough for Helen, so she dug further, and some civil servant and revealed to her that means, "We've received it but we've lost it." She says, "Well, you'd better find it." So she got another letter a couple of weeks later, says, "We have received your application and it's under active consideration." So she contacted the same person. She said, "What does that mean?" She said, "That's code for we've lost it but we're looking for it." And she refused to accept that and took it all the way until the application was fully reviewed and it ended up being passed. And that was just typical of Helen. She never let go. Total belief in what she wanted to see happen for the better of other people, and she pursued it with full vigour. She was a wonderful woman.
Well, thank you very much. I know that we've got a very, very tight agenda this morning, but I did feel it was appropriate, you know, given that we are talking about structural funds this morning, we all managed to say a few words in tribute to Helen. So we're moving on to agenda item 1, which is the decision to take agenda items 4, 5 and 6 in private. Our committee minded to do that. Excellent. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is our roundtable discussion on European structural and investment programmes for 2014 to 2020. We've taken evidence from European Commission's officials last month, and today we very much welcome the opportunity to speak with you all. You all come from different parts of the structure, but very, very welcome parts of the structure and very detailed and wise parts of the structure. So we're looking very much to hearing your evidence this morning. And it's just general roundtable rules. If you catch my eye, I'll let you in. But, you know, some people are quite far down, and I've got my specs on, so I should see you from where I am. But Jamie might do semaphore, he said, to get some attention. So, but we'll just, if we go around the table a bit, and just if people just catch my eye, we'll try and get a decent flow of conversation. And I'm going to kick off with the very first one, and I think, Kat, you're first up. I'm sorry, but we're going to get the Scottish Government's position first. And we know that you're publishing the update to the proposal soon. And we just wondered if you can maybe give us some insight into the update in those proposals, and given there's a delay in the multi-annual financial framework, how it all ties together. If you could give us maybe an overview of that to kick off.
Okay, sure. We have been planning to publish an update on proposals. We're aware we did a public consultation in May. We've spent an awful long time over summer working with many of the people in this room on firming up plans. As you know, we've sort of not done the classic European linear approach to developing this, so we've not picked words that look sensible on a page, but rather we've gone at it from the other end and tried to think about where and how would this money have the biggest impact, and try and make it really quite pragmatic from the beginning, so that when we launch into the programmes, we almost know what we're doing before we've actually started them, before we've written them, and we can write the programmes around what we want to do. The update at the moment is sitting with ministers for clearance. And it's doing that because, obviously, in being this pragmatic about it, that update will have quite a wealth of information about what the programmes will say, what will be in them. It's quite a full one, the way that it's been drafted, because we're aware that having done the public consultation and having done the series of delivery partnerships over the summer, not everyone has been able to be involved in them, just for sheer size of scale of the stakeholder base that we have across the 4 European funds that we use in Scotland, or that we control directly in Scotland. So we really want to make sure that everybody is getting as wide a picture as possible. So it is kind of a preview of what will be in the partnership agreement. It is a list of all of the proposals that have been made over summer by partners, and the conclusions that they've reached together. And it starts to talk a little bit about the practicalities of simplification and implementation, and I guess making sure that we're ready to start on time. We're hearing good, solid rumours from Europe that the multi-annual financial framework is either over the doorstep or just on the doorstep, and that bodes really well for the regulatory package. There's only a few little snags left between the Council and the European Parliament to negotiate through, so we are now hoping that the regulatory package will be ready in December. All things being well, that is when the whole UK partnership agreement will be ready as well, with the structural fund OPs to follow very shortly thereafter, and the rural fund ones to follow in April. So we are just about on target for where we wanted to be and for starting on time.
Yeah, I know that January is the proposed start time. Do you think that everything will be in place for January's?
I still have my suspicions that things will come off the rails a little bit, either in Europe or between Europe and the UK. At the moment, we have had, and I understand you got some of this from Agnes Lindemans last month as well, there are some pretty distinct stylistic differences between the different parts of the UK partnership agreement. Some of them are quite open about which challenges we need these funds to address, and some of them are a little bit more laudatory of efforts that have been going on up until now. I suspect that may mean that we hit delays in the negotiations between the UK and the Commission, but certainly we're still aiming for as early in the first half of the year as is humanly possible.
Okay, thanks very much. If any of our guests around the table this morning got any insights into how they feel about the MAF and programmes being ready, or sometimes I think, you know, you get quite decent information from the coalface. If no, Linda.
Just a couple of general observations, almost, if you like, from the other side of the table there. We are obviously all looking with great attention to see what's going to be happening next. I would have to say that the general view, certainly in my sector and from my part of Scotland, up in the Highlands and Islands, is very much a welcome of the approach that's been taken. I think there's been a realistic attempt to involve people without it becoming too bureaucratic and too top-heavy, and that has certainly been welcomed. I think the obvious determination to be much more aligned, not just across the different funds, But with what's happening with national strategies and government economic strategy, that is very, very much welcomed. And again, Scott, the approach that Kat and her team have taken to trying to shift the balance into a much more results-oriented approach to what's happening. So just as she said there, we're concentrating on what we're going to be delivering and then looking at how we do that. So I think there's been a lot of very, very good work done there. Certainly we're picking up every effort has been made to keep things to the timetable. There are going to be other external factors that will affect that, but I think there has been a determination. So an awful lot of what has been done there has been welcomed. Of course, we're coming to perhaps the more challenging part on the implementation of it, and I think that's where we need to look at some of the detail there. But so far, so good, I think, is broadly what our view is.
Thank you. Alan Boyle.
Thank you. I would agree with everything that's been said there by Linda, that the development process has been far more engaged. The view is more strategic, but we are reaching the kind of critical stage here of how are we going to get this implemented and when, because people have to be planning, they have to be lining things up. Now, as much as it's a more strategic approach, and the whole concept, I think, is generally welcomed, even within, the third sector and their wide range of employability provision, we don't bring match funding to the table, so we're incredibly vulnerable to everybody else. But we line up match funding with other partners. Now, the same information is contained in the written response from COSLA about the enhanced employability skills pipeline, and from the Scottish Chamber of Commerce input. It's about who's, at the end of the day, we will change the framework, we will change the objectives, we will simplify the programme, we will make it results orientated. These things have all got to be welcomed. We will strengthen partnership working, we will bring the thing together. But it's the people who are the boots on the ground that will still have to deliver this. It is the organisations under our network, it is the Chamber of Commerce. That's where growth and jobs is really going to take place. Not on some massive scale or return to large labour-intensive industries. And our sector is particularly good at taking those people who are multiply disadvantaged and furthest away from the labour market and putting them into those very jobs. What we need to be is planning for exactly what we're going to deliver and when can we start it, because we want to make this programme a success, as we have with other ones, and it's getting to that point. And it's starting to clear, as Kat indicates, and we're hoping, well, we're certainly hoping, I think, as a sector, that it's no later than April, the start of the next financial year, in real terms. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz Cameron.
I'm actually probably coming at it from two ends. If I look at it from a strategic point of view, yes, I actually do welcome the approach that the Scottish Government has taken in terms of attempting to rationalise and bring all the fragmentation that's out there in the marketplace together into one potential mechanism, delivery mechanism. I think that's good for Scotland. And I absolutely welcome that coming from a private sector. I'm also coming at it in terms of, I've worked as a delivery organisation probably for nearly 25 years, 27 years on European funding, and a lot of which my frustration level in terms of audit process, in terms of duplication of effort in some areas, and also in terms of the fit with what business actually needs rather than funding. And I'm not saying it happens throughout Scotland, but funding organisations or programmes that possibly are not meeting what it was they set out to achieve from day one. So I think the opportunity that this has given Scotland, the Scottish Government in particular, to stop and take stock of what is actually working on the ground in terms of having real economic impact, in terms of jobs and in terms of business competitiveness. So for me, this has been a welcomed and a refreshing approach, and having personally attended a number of the subgroup meetings, absolutely very challenging. And although I thought that I had a handle on most public sector organisations and what they're delivering, if I use the phrase of herding cats, believe you me, that's what we're talking about in some cases. There are some public organisations that are absolutely supporting the the direction of travel that I think we're attempting to take Scotland in, but there are others that are perhaps requiring a little bit more of a push in terms of stopping. And because we've done programme X, Y and Z for the last 10 years, that does not mean to say that it's fitting the economic environment that Scotland now finds itself in a global marketplace. So I think let's not underestimate the challenges moving ahead in terms of, we've got some indicators and themes, we've got some indicators in terms of potential governance, and a lot of the improvements that I understand will be made in terms of process in particular, and also audit, to make certain that our European funds that are coming into Scotland are funding not process, but actually funding products and services for business. It was a beautiful phrase that I used at one of the committee meetings, because what I sat and listened to for nearly 2 hours was what organisations were doing to business and not with and for business. And you know, we're a partnership here, and the business community, in terms of European funding, there's a gap in knowledge out there in terms of the business community, and we've got to do an awful lot more, hopefully in partnership and in a collaborative way, to bring business on board, so that business, they've got a role, they've also got funding if we actually tap in the right direction to ensure that we're actually looking very closely at our infrastructure investment as well. And I'll stop there at that point.
Two supplementary points on Lizzie's evidence from Hanzala first, and then Leslie, and then we're going to move on to the Highlands and Islands stuff from Jamie. Okay?
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning and welcome everybody. You've made 2 points that I've picked up on. One is that you feel the Scottish Government's moving in the right direction. I think I need to give this committee a lot of credit for that. I think they've done a lot of work towards that direction. However, you also said that some organisations need a bit of a push. Now, do you mean push in terms of they need more support? And if so, what type of support you feel we could give them to give them that encouragement? Or do you mean push in the sense that they just need a kick at the backside to get them going? Just please be candid, because we are very keen to ensure the success of this. People like yourself who are working in the coalface, you're best placed to give us that good advice.
I think in some organisations, in public sector organisations, in terms of a culture that's been created that dictates we've got a budget of X, and this is what we're going to be doing with it. And with the reduction of budget spend hitting the marketplace in public organisations, what I have experienced have been not a revisit of what they do or how they do it. It's a revisit of what additional funds can we get in to fund what we're currently doing. And what we are saying in Scottish Chambers is that we've got to stop and look closely at the kind of measurements. If we're talking about business support activity, and there's an array of business support activity out there. I mean, it's actually Scotland's very, very well catered for in terms of business support.
Sorry, can I just intervene? I'm basically wanting to try to identify who you feel could do with the additional support.
I don't believe it's about additional support. I think it's actually about a directive to say very closely, let's examine very in detail what a number of public sector agencies are doing in terms of business support activity that's getting funded with European funding.
I'm trying to identify.
If we talk about business, I'll give 2 examples then. One, first of all, on employment and support for perhaps individuals taking on young people, individuals taking on unemployed individuals. There's actually an array of programmes out there right now, and they're not joining up. And there is also business support activity that's actually been duplicated by a number of organisations that could in fact be reduced and be delivered more efficiently. So it's a matter of looking the support they need or the direction they need.
I know what you're
asking of me.
I'm asking.
I know what you're asking
you
of
made a point, and I'm just trying
all
to
I would say is I think that it's up to the Scottish Government officials to be looking closely at what the strategy and business plans are for public sector agencies on business competitiveness. I'm not going to name one particular organisation.
Okay, we name 2 then.
No, I'm not going to name 2 either. I'm not. But what I'm saying is you need to look very, very closely at that, because it's not always meeting on paper on the ground.
Maybe you can give me them in private.
I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you.
I see Kat's taking lots of notes anyway, so I think it's been well noted. Leslie, do you want to come in on that point, and then we'll move on to Jamie's theme?
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to come in on a number of points that have already been discussed. Going back to the original question about the multi-annual financial framework and the Commission's view of the UK partnership agreement, I think what we're hearing is similar to Kat, that the financial framework and the regulations are all but there, that there's probably a little bit more work to do in terms of how the devolved administrations and the UK partnership agreement is developed, and that will require a bit more negotiation with the Commission. But in terms of stakeholder engagement, I think it's important that we remember that we are further advanced in terms of our thinking and our ability to start a structural funds programme than we have ever been in my experience of working with structural funds in Scotland. So I think it's all of the agencies involved, although it's been extremely challenging in terms of timescales that we've had to meet, have really actively participated in trying to pull together something that allows Scotland to start its programme as quickly as possible. I think picking up on things that Linda and Liz and Alan have already said, we've still got a lot more work to do in terms of the detail. Whilst the high-level interventions have been discussed and we've talked about the various ways we need to work together in partnership to deliver those, the actual detail of how we do that is now what's focusing our mind, and a lot more discussion required to take place. And we're also doing a lot of work together on how we can use the simplified cost options in a way that doesn't mean that we're starting from scratch and putting in place systems that people will have to learn all over again.
That's very informative, actually, to hear, you know, what's happening, because you get the strategic point of view, and then I quite like to know what's happening on the ground. Being someone who used to run a programme, I like to know that things are clicking into place. We're going to move on, Jamie, I think, to Highlands and Islands, and I know that Linda had brought up some points about Highlands and Islands, and I know that you wanted to come in on that. But if you just use up the questions you've got and the theme that you want to, focus on, and do that now. Yeah, okay.
Yes, I noticed from the evidence to the committee that the UHI gave, you point out the distinctive territorial challenges which the region faces, and obviously it's the only region that's is a transition region. You talk about peripherality, different markets, low population density, the continued loss of young people being issues, and I'd like to add to that bad roads, bad broadband, and old infrastructure, just as three extra things. Now, it's being proposed that the Highlands and Islands region and the rest of Scotland will form a single unit for operational programmes. And I suppose my question, you did also list the advantages of which is the fact that the region has great potential to make significant contributions to the EU 2020 targets, i.e. because it's got considerable natural and cultural assets, a growing reputation for innovation, and around 25% of Europe's wind, wave and tidal resources. And I might add to that 80% of Europe's peatlands, which are a very important carbon sink. So I suppose, having said all that, my question is one operational programme going to sort of look at the differences of Highlands and Islands in comparison to the Central Belt or the rest of Scotland, which are completely, it is a very different place. So why is this sort of integration going to happen? And I'm just worried about that, and I wonder if you could possibly relieve my anxiety a little. The other thing I wanted to ask you is about this thing called an ITI, which is an integrated territorial investment. And again, I think that seems to be a way of integrating the Highlands and Islands into the rest of Scotland. And I'm just, again, while I'm not necessarily against that, I want to see how it's going to benefit the Highlands and Islands, which is, after all, does benefit a little bit from being the only transition region. Is that enough to start with?
Linda.
Certainly, thank you very much for that. There's certainly a lot to be going on with here. And in the spirit of you're looking for candid answers here, I shall attempt to do so. As we've all said previously, the approach, the strategic approach so far, I think is to be welcomed. But we certainly have concerns in the Highlands and Islands about the next step, the implementation. Now, what we're trying to do with this integrated territorial investment approach, it's something that's new. We don't know exactly what the shape of it's going to be yet. We're working very closely with Scottish Government on the options that are there from the European Commission for this kind of model. We do believe that this offers a way through the very real problems that you've just outlined there. We know for a fact that there are ongoing territorial challenges in the Highlands and Islands, as you've outlined there. We also know that we've got opportunities there. Similarly, with the structural funds, there are opportunities to work in a different kind of way here and look at the advantages of taking a Scotland-wide approach to what we're trying to achieve. So on the one hand, I don't want to see the Highlands and Islands being left to one side in that, not being part of that discussion. I think there's a lot of opportunity from us sitting around the table together and saying, what have we got to contribute from our part of Scotland? On the other hand, we have to be able to recognise the specificities of the Highlands and Islands, and we need, in actual fact, that there's a separate allocation of funding for the region as a transition region there, which must be spent in the region and to the benefit of the region. So really what we're trying to do is marry these two together. The ITI, as we see it just now, will give us the opportunity for Highlands and Islands partners, all of the key stakeholders in the area, to work together, and that's something we're very good at doing in the Highlands and Islands. We're doing quite a lot of work just now on the smart specialisation strategy, looking at focusing in on a region's strengths and working together in partnership. When we first heard about that at some of our Highlands and Islands meetings, we said, well, wait a minute, that's what we do anyway. Why on earth would you do it any other way? That's the way we work. We work well together in partnership across the sectors. So the ITI then gives us an opportunity to package together some of that activity, but still be working within the broad Scottish approach. Now, we do have very real concerns on how that's going to pan out, because a lot of the discussions at the moment are looking at national approaches to what's going to be happening. We do have assurances, because we've been raising these issues from the very start, as you would expect, and we have assurances that there will be enough flexibility in how the programmes, how the funded activities will be delivered. But it's something that we're keeping a very, very close eye on, because we do want to see the opportunity to be more specific. Let me just finish by giving perhaps one example from my own sector. The main opportunities that we would want to, where we would want to participate in the new programming period, are in skills and innovation. And there's some very, very good indications of what Scotland is going to be doing and how there's going to be planning for delivering an aligned skills approach there at all different levels, working alongside what we do in innovation in the key growth sectors and so on. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. We're also assured that we'll be able to tailor these areas to suit the Highlands and Islands. However, when there's a lot of discussions taking place at national level on how match funding plans come together, will we really be able to do that? That's where our concerns lie at the moment. And the example I was going to quote was on learning centres. Now, we have something in the region of 100 learning centres across the Highlands and Islands, which allow access to education and training that just hasn't been there before. And that's in some of our most remote and island communities there. It's a very, very important part of being able to deliver further and higher education. We're at this point not sure if we would be able to carry on delivering there, because that's not the same issue right in the centre of a more urban area there. So it's the kind of thing like that we need to be keeping an eye on. How flexible is flexible, and how rigid are the plans going to be when we actually get to the implementation stage? So your comment, I couldn't agree more with the comments you've made there, and please take reassurances that at regional level we're working very, very hard to address some of these.
Can I just, I fully understand the importance of your regional education centres, and I've visited a good many of them, in the islands especially. These are wonderful things. Is there any evidence that these are drawing in people from outside to come and study in the Highlands and Islands? Because obviously that brings in, you know, useful knowledge from other districts and other parts of the world, which can sometimes rub off and provide you know, incentives for business as well. Is there any? Are you seeing any success running down that road?
I couldn't give you indications of success down to learning centre level, but overall in the Highlands and Islands, including the different campuses that we have for the University of the Highlands and Islands and the learning centres where they operate, we are seeing an increase in numbers, which is certainly to be welcomed. Of course, we would expect that to an extent now that we have university title, but it's been really encouraging to see these numbers coming in, including provision in the learning centres. What I think we've got to concentrate on is that although it's increase in numbers and it is making a huge difference, as you rightly say, in local communities, and looking at the, you know, the business implications and flexibility in different modes of learning and so on. And it's a welcoming approach there. We're not about trying to say everybody has to study and stay in the Highlands and Islands. We're looking at increasing people coming from elsewhere in a welcoming way. But the numbers we're talking about are still very, very small when you go down to individual learning centre level. And there is a fragility there that we need to be very, very careful. So when we're talking about maybe implications of some of the planning coming through that might decrease numbers in learning centres by 2 or 3. For some learning centres, that could be the make or break of them, and that's why we're very passionate about saying we need to be able to tailor things to suit our particular circumstances.
Just finally, just on that subject, when you say the numbers are small in the centres, is that for financial reasons or are there other reasons?
Mixture of different reasons, wherein lies a lot of our planning as to what we want to do with the structural funds to make sure that we're increasing numbers and making these centres sustainable. It's not about lots of new build here, it's making sure that what we've got is sustainable. And I think, again, that's the kind of approach that we need to look at, just making sure that we are working together to address the issues.
Thank you very much.
It's at the heart of what we want to do.
Ansala, you got a point on this one yet?
I'm going to presume that there's a finance implication in all of this, and just to ease the pain. But what I'm going to ask you is, education is something that's very important for us. And I'm just wondering whether the university is going to look at alternative use of buildings in communities, almost like satellite centres where there isn't a cost implication, where the centres have space available. And in terms of the shortfall, and I'm not thinking long term, I don't want all the educational unions jumping on top of me, but just to bridge the gap, if we could even look at people who've either retired or have recently lost their jobs or have left the education industry and wish to come back in, possibly even as volunteers, to kickstart the whole education arena. Would that be something that you could maybe explore?
Certainly, I think that's an excellent point, and it very much ties into the point that the member made there. That's what we have to do, particularly in smaller communities, is look at how you work together and share some of the issues and making sure that small centres work. And a lot of the time, it's not making sure you've got, money to build a huge new impressive unit there. It's making sure you've got someone who's got the keys coming in 8 in the morning so that a couple of students coming in to join a video conference for their degree provision are actually able to do that. So
I'm just thinking what I would not want to happen is our young students in the Highlands be disadvantaged by not either having choice of subject or availability in local areas. So perhaps if you maybe give this a little bit more consideration and give us a feedback whether that's feasible, it would be very helpful.
Certainly happy to do that. We do quite a lot of analysis on the issues facing our learning centres, and indeed that's one of the things that we would want to have at the heart of what we would intend to do with structural fund support, is address these very issues. Happy to look at some of the stats and come back to you with that.
Ms Cameron.
I just struck in the discussion we've just had there in terms of buildings versus people versus servicing in terms of Highlands and Islands. Now, I've got 9 chambers across Highlands and Islands, and it is absolutely very, very important that we absolutely understand the challenges that face communities in these areas. And whilst from an efficiency point of view, on paper, we could draw a plan up that says, you know, let's reduce process here, let's reduce the efficiencies of the organisations who are monitoring and measuring European funding. I would support that wholly, because I believe there could be quite a lot of savings made there, and that funding could be used elsewhere. So having the one organisation and the one process covering all of Scotland for the general management and measuring and monitoring of European funding should be the way forward. The but's coming now, and the but's coming in terms of, you use the word integration. I don't know what you're talking about in terms of that framework, but I actually wrote down the word connectivity. I was actually in Shetlands last week, and I had 65 businesses in a room. And yes, economically on paper, doing well, balancing its books in terms of an area and a region. But the one big issue for the majority of businesses on Shetland and elsewhere in the Highlands and Islands is the lack of digital connectivity. And, you know, seeing a proposal coming forward that says, let's create 10, you know, IT consultants that's going to go across Highlands and Islands to advise business on to make use of information technology. Fine in broad principle, but we do not have, quite frankly, the pipeline that's saying that they can actually connect. You know, we're wasting money. I'd like to see that fund, and again, that comes back to my point about, are we funding the right thing in terms of infrastructure investment, and also the potential of tapping into some private corporate companies in Scotland stroke the United Kingdom that have got the facilities and the resources and should in fact be working and putting more money on the table to invest in ensuring that we are all connected. So that partnership that I talk about, it's not just about using European money or public money. There's a number of private companies that we should be going and knocking the door and saying, you know, how are you actually going to ensure that we've got that investment in the Highlands and Islands? And challenging that when we're not getting the response that we need. We talk about, and again, the building part, and I'm probably just for a moment just, talking about lottery for a second. We're talking about empowering communities, and it might be that you want to consider, providing we get the connectivity right on the ground, that we can consider start looking at the Growing Community Assets Fund, matching that with European funding, and start empowering the communities in the Highlands and Islands. You know, they're an exemplar of how communities can come together. Start empowering them and start looking at the potential of withdrawing some public bodies that are operating some of these centres and giving it back to the communities with the proper funding for sustainability. Consider it, is all I'm saying. I just think that we sometimes miss a trick that it doesn't need to always be, you know, the normal public bodies that are delivering this.
Kat. I'm really quite heartened by a lot of what I'm hearing, because as Linda knows, we've put a huge amount of effort into figuring out how this will work between the Highlands and Islands and the rest of Scotland. Because all of the ESI funds are trying to integrate, and the Fisheries Fund runs at a UK level and the Rural Fund runs at an all-Scotland level, there's something here to explore about how you minimise the administrative structures so that, as Liz has pointed out, we end up actually having the money going to the right place, but still taking care of the specific territorial challenges that the Highlands and Islands face, but actually also that other areas in Scotland face. In terms of some of the specifics that have been made here, I think it's worth raising that one of the things we're working with partners in the Highlands and Islands on at the moment is figuring out what an integrated territorial investment might look like. There is this notion that we need to balance between taking advantage of the things that the Highlands and Islands has that actually the rest of Scotland doesn't, and peatlands is a great example, and obviously the renewables powerhouse that it potentially could be is another. So actually there's something there that the Highlands and Islands could contribute, but it may need something in terms of that community sustainability over and above what the rest of Scotland needs in order to make the most of those advantages for the Highlands and Islands and for the rest of Scotland. And it's coming at it from that lens, seeing what do we need to do nationally but tailor locally in terms of making sure that the right organisations are involved in boots on the ground. And actually what additional support is needed for a region like the Highlands and Islands, and how do we package all of that together. Several folk have mentioned broadband, and I think it's worth raising, since you took evidence from the Commission last month, that DG Regio in particular are not persuaded that anywhere in the UK, and indeed in any of the developed member states, should be allowed to spend funding where they think the market ought to cover it. And broadband is one of those areas. We've had a number of conversations with the Commission because we disagree with that. The work that we've done with partners over the summer has shown that there is universal disagreement with that proposal from the Commission that we shouldn't spend money on broadband. And one of the things that we're going to be doing through the partnership agreement negotiations is making that case really quite forcefully, with support from partners, with support from our digital colleagues in the Scottish Government, to show them actually what a significant issue this still remains in a geography like the one that Scotland has. And the other thing I wanted to touch on is something that Linda started mentioning around skills being a really important aspect of all of this. We're trying to engender real change with the 2014 to 20 programme so that skills are not skills for their own sake. Skills is a huge part of a country being competitive and actually making the most of not just natural assets but human assets as well. And one of the things that we're really trying to do with this is to link regional, either business or sectoral strengths, assets, with what kind of skills needs are going to come out both of colleges and universities, but actually also the existing workforce. So it is a really big push. We've been working with the university and college sector and with SDS and SFC, and one of the things that they're very keen on is using some of this funding for planning their skills supply, if you like, through regional skills plans. And actually the first one on the ground is the Highlands and Islands Regional Skills Plan that really details what the opportunities are, what kind of skills that's likely to demand. And I think that there's a real opportunity actually for the Highlands and Islands and for UHI here to pull in some of those specialisms and to kind of make them their own and make sure that people are attracted to come and study in the Highlands and Islands, that there are then follow-up economic opportunities for them to stay and to help the region grow.
Yeah, a lot of information there. I've got a couple of people who want to get in. Stuart, McMillan, then Leslie, then Alan.
Thank you very much, Convener. When I was listening to Liz Cameron, it took me back to the Local Government Regeneration Committee work over the last year. So we undertook an inquiry into public services reform. And the vast majority of what you said has actually been covered in those particular reports. So just wondering, actually, I thought maybe Liz Cameron's been reading those reports on that particular committee. There was a number of points that were said. I'm not going to touch upon them all, but just a couple. The issue of the community planning, I think, is so important. And it actually highlights that, irrespective as to whether it's the Highlands and Islands or whether it's elsewhere in Scotland, just that key part of actually getting the partners around the table to really work and progress what's required for that particular area is so important. The empowerment, and that was touched upon in terms of community empowerment, obviously with the bill that's in the Parliament, and it's obviously it's in the papers as well. Although the Local Government Committee is not going to be looking at that, it's a different committee. But the issue of empowerment, community empowerment, is just so important, particularly in the more rural communities, where there's obviously kind of a strength there over many years, and certainly more urban areas can certainly learn a thing or two from the rural communities. Just a final point, just regarding the skills comment that was touched upon a moment ago in terms of the country's competitiveness. Absolutely, it's so crucial for that, and whether it's from a local government perspective or in terms of productivity there, or whether it's from the private sector perspective, it's just so crucial. And in terms of ensuring that any investment that goes into skills, whether it's to the likes of UHI or any other institution in Scotland, is making sure that the best outcome is the result as compared to the money that goes into that particular investment.
Thanks, Stuart. Leslie.
Thank you. Just a couple of points I would like to make. One in relation to the discussion about the Highlands and Islands. In all of the discussions we've been involved with in relation to developing strategic interventions for the structural funds and talking about this at a national level, Highlands and Islands have been represented in all of those discussions through Highlands and Islands Enterprise and also UHI and the European Partnership. And a lot of the discussion has been about how do we deliver against this mixed agenda of national priorities, overall strategic outcomes and the regional strengths and differences across Scotland. And as Linda said, part of that discussion is also taking place around our smart specialisation and regional equity and assets and how we focus those interventions to maximise the opportunities at the regional level and to address gaps and issues that are impeding our innovation across the patch. So there is a lot of discussion still going on about the detail, and the integrated territorial investment opportunity we think is one that will help address those issues. The other point I just wanted to make is that these discussions about European structural and investment funds are not going on in isolation from our discussions about the wider range of European funding opportunities that Scotland has access to. And in our partnership discussions, we are also looking at what can the Interreg programmes bring to the table and what can the Horizon 2020 funds bring to the table, and how do we make sure we use our structural funds as effectively as we can, again, particularly in the area of innovation, to help business capacity to engage in some of these other European funding opportunities, and how do we use some of these calls for innovative solutions to address things like remote and peripheral digital connectivity. So there is a bigger set of discussions going on in parallel with the ESI, where we're looking at how can we make the best use of this mix of funds for Scotland.
I'm becoming extremely aware of the time. I've got a lot of areas to cover, so I'm going to bring Alan in next and then Seraphin, and then Patricia. I was going to move on to the thematic part of it that you've got an interest in. So Alan.
Okay, I'll try and be brief. We could probably spend all day if I took this as a theme, which is what do we think success will look like, you know, compared to what's happened in the current programme. But coming from the perspective of a sector whose biggest engagement is working with those furthest away from the labour market, and knowing that the bulk of the ones that do move into jobs do so in small and micro enterprises. One of the things that we underestimate, and it doesn't matter about the spatial dimension in Scotland, everyone's got them, groups that are really hard to help and hard to reach. And what we have not done is found a way to articulate a common language about the distances those people travel through intervention. It won't always be, you know, the full hard outcome journey into a sustainable job in one fell swoop. But I'll give you a tangible example. This is from analysis that's been done within the sector. 75% of people that get supported move into the labour market, into jobs or further education and training on leaving. But 90%, this is something we developed working with Big Lottery, 90% feel more positive about their employment future having taken part. Now, within 6 months, a third of the ones who didn't leave to something positive have got something. So it means they've become self-empowered, they're saving us money because they're not going to other services, they're just cracking on themselves and moving into the labour market. So the real success rate is 83% because those people feel better. And we forget, I think at times there is a very human dimension to this. Those people feel better about themselves, where they're going, empowered, and can actually take action. Kat and I have had some discussions on this, and we know there's more work to be done. We are not sophisticated enough yet to look at distances travelled, but for all of us, we need to be more assured that whatever interventions we do, can we see and feel better about the impacts that they're having.
Okay, thank you, Seraphin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come up with a number of points that are being raised so far. I mean, I think we broadly agree not just COSLA, but the other partners here around the table and others are not here today, that the process has been a useful one, has been far more open than in the past. I personally work with my counterparts from other countries on a mostly daily basis, and we tend to review how the partnership negotiations are in their countries, and with a few exceptions, I think we are doing fairly well. In terms of integration, I think there has been a quite honest effort being done here, and particularly by the Scottish Government, trying to actually look at integration, integrated priorities, and avoiding duplications, and sometimes trying to sort out the problems created by the rules defined at EU level. I think we are going as far as possibly, or as realistically possibly could, in terms of integration. And it's a pity, perhaps, that even as the rules are about, well, actually the structural funds rules have just been finalised, there have been some progress compared to the previous, the current rules, but still, I mean, perhaps we couldn't go even further in integration in terms of ensuring there is no duplication and there's consistency approaches across the funds than we could have gone further than what we are actually going to go. But I think we're trying to exploit as much as possible what is possibly from a practical, pragmatic, and as well from an audit point of view. I think I'd like to highlight that we were working here, but also influencing the discussion in Brussels since from the outset. And one thing that we were pushed, and we were quite satisfied the way it came out, sufficiently satisfied in terms of the regulations, the emphasis in local development. Now is actually one of the main drivers of the new programs, both in the structural funds, but also in the rural development one. And we are pleased that overall that's a theme that has been taking very much up to the discussions here in Scotland in terms of drafting the partnership agreement. I mean, it's worth reminding that one of the three strategic development partnerships is about local development and social inclusion, which is something we very much contributed, both COSLA but also the members, the local authorities working with COSLA on that. But I would even say that it goes further. I mean, I think there is a number of other possible strategic interventions in the other two themes that also have a local dimension, which is something that we support. Is worth mentioning that at the origin of the current reform programme was a report called the Barker report that precisely makes the emphasis on the place-based approach. So it's a question of maximising that. I think everybody has welcomed the partnership approach. I think it's something we should move forward. I think the devil is going to be now in the detail. I mean, there's a number of things that have been raised here which we subscribe in terms of trying to seek the clarification. Now that we have to translate that into specific legal commitments and practical arrangements that we need to look at. And we particularly welcome that. We believe that community planning will have, community partnership will have a particular role in terms of bringing together local partners in a bigger scale perhaps than we have already experienced in the current programs. We are also hopeful that some of the logic of the single outcome agreements can be translated somehow into the new programs. I say somehow because the rules doesn't allow a total outcome-based approach we are trying here in Scotland, but there's been a move to outputs that perhaps was not present there in the past. And finally, I mean, I would say that our position has always been that it will be useful to have a partnership agreement covering the whole of Scotland. Perhaps, like other colleagues here, we have been a bit more concerned about trying to force also together all the operational programs or Scotland-wide operational programs. But however, as discussed here, there might be opportunities to actually try to ensure that, as the EU rules foresee anyway, the Highlands and Islands priorities are better reflected and delivered in a specific way, which is something we will be keen to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Serafin. I think, Patricia, we're going to move on to the thematic objectives. If you want to just open with that, and then we can get some questions in.
Thanks, Convener. The consultation over the summer offered the opportunity also to talk about the themed funds and whether or not they would meet the objectives that were being laid out, and it would appear from the responses that most people were quite content with those, but there was some suggestion that perhaps there needed to be more flexibility to allow local issues to be addressed. And I wondered whether colleagues today would like to comment on that. I know the Chamber of Commerce, or the Chambers of Commerce, I should say, suggested that the themed funds could only succeed if there was also involvement from the private sector as well within each theme and across each theme. So I wondered whether, as I say, colleagues would want to comment on whether the themed funds are actually the correct ones and whether they are broad enough to allow the ESI funds to help Scotland to get to the 2020 objectives.
Okay, Jimmy.
Oh, well,
Yes.
just further to that question, just a small one. In the evidence to the committee, the Scottish Chamber of Commerce said that the Scottish Government's priorities for Scotland lack explicit recognition of the vital role that the private sector will play in delivering the priorities set. And I really wondered if perhaps Liz Cameron could perhaps enlarge on that.
Pick up Jamie's point, but I think maybe there's a number of points in Patricia's questions that you'd want to pick up on as well.
Okay, yes, I'll leave, I think, some of my other organisations here to comment in terms of their views, in terms of the local perspective. I do believe they're general enough, if they're interpreted correctly, that could allow that kind of flexibility, because I think, we're all talking about this localism agenda. And, most of the successes that the Chambers have had, and I have had as SCC, is because of that local community and that local delivery mechanism. So, whilst we will have the Scottish cloak around it, if you like, there's got to be enough flexibility. And I've heard the word innovation this morning as well. There's got to be enough flexibility around that to allow local organisations to come up with local solutions. Yes, we've got a skills strategy that's saying we need this. That's fine, but in some areas they've got to be able to adapt that localism and that agenda to suit their particular region or geographical area. So I think I'll caveat with providing it's being interpreted correctly by those who are managing and making the decisions on projects that may or may not come up from local organisations, providing that we've got the right skill and expertise and knowledge on these committees. They should be general enough to allow that to happen. And I'm caveating because my experience historically has not allowed that in the way that you talk about innovation. The best way to get innovation is by grassroots coming up and saying, this is what the need is, rather than us come up with a structure and detail around, especially in the skills agenda, that's sometimes based on delivery organisations' marketplace rather than the need of business or the need of the communities. So I think just to make certain that that's, I'm looking over at Kat here because, for me that's quite important that, the private sector around the table, as a result of Scottish Government inviting us, but there have been many instances where the private sector have been excluded from those discussions. And yet there's a knowledge base there that needs to be tapped into, and I'd like to see, and should not be based on our ability to match fund. The place at the table should not be, well, we love your idea, but where are you getting the money from? That's not acceptable in today's marketplace. So I would hope, closing all of that off. I'm sorry, Patricia, was that, did I respond?
Yeah, I think that's the point I'd sort of picked up from your own paper, that was your concern that perhaps business wasn't being, or business needs were not being reflected, and it comes back to a few of the things you were saying earlier on too, Liz. So,
and thank you for giving the opportunity to reinforce that, because we do feel very, very strongly about it. And, yes, we welcome the European Commission specifically stating that business and SMEs should be engaged in the delivery of the funding. We've got to make sure that the culture change to interpret that in the correct way means that we want a place around the table. We want to be part of the decision making. If a project's coming up for £3, £4, £5, £10 million, I think we've got a place at the table to determine whether that's really what business needs. And we're willing to put our time and effort into doing this. And I'd like to see that that being not just acknowledged, but actually building business into the mechanism.
Karen, do you want to come in on those points, and then I'll pick up from Kat yet?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Just in terms of the national sort of versus the local agenda, I think in terms of the employability and skills theme, I would say that that local agenda does get picked up quite well through the local authorities and other partners. However, I think in the competitiveness, there's still some more caution, and it echoes some of Liz's concerns. And picking up one of your earlier points, Liz, if you look at North Ayrshire, we have about 4,000 businesses, but at least 14 organisations offering some sort of business support. And that's a lot, and I think there's some issues around how that gets managed. And certainly, from a North Ayrshire perspective, we are working hard with those 14-plus organisations to make sure that we're putting a package of offering together that suits local business. That said, and I think this is where the question mark around how much local input, or that there needs to be local input into delivering the competitiveness agenda, is that those 14 organisations, we're tending to focus on the same groups of businesses. So it tends to be the larger ones and some of those account managed companies that we have through our national agencies. But in North Ayrshire, we have about 40 of those locally, whereas there's 100, 150 plus businesses locally who we think have at least got the same business potential for growth. And yet there's very little support for those happening, and certainly through national programmes, they're not getting the same intensity of support as those 40 larger ones. So we think that there is real scope locally to make sure that there is a local provision to support those businesses who have absolutely got the growth potential. And the EU funding is potentially very helpful in providing a suite of activity to help support those businesses to grow. But at the moment, it's not yet secure that that local dimension will play through the European programmes. We have been working with CAT and with other partners over the summer months to help solidify that position, but I would say we're not there yet. So I think there's still a caution that I would have that in the competitiveness agenda that we have got sufficient local dimension. The other point I'd make is around the flexibility point, and I think again echoing some of what Liz said, there's the coalface, if you like, you end up delivering a European programme which is quite distinct from actually working with a business to find out what their business needs are and actually responding to make sure that we can put a package of activity together that helps that business grow and develop. So I would say as much flexibility as possible within the programme that enables us at the coalface to work with business as opposed to delivering the programme. And once we start focusing on delivering the programme, it sometimes causes us to lose sight of the fact that actually what we're about is to support business.
Before I move it on to Kat, because hopefully she'll think about this and maybe the rest of the guests would think about it, is the Scottish chapter of the partnership agreement. There's lots of areas there that people have but not specifically said whether there's things missing from it, there's things that could be more enhanced in it. So if I come to you first, Kat, maybe to just answer some of the questions, but also maybe to give us a wee bit of insight into the Scottish chapter, and if anybody else has got anything to add, then just catch my eye. Kat.
I suppose where I'd like to start in all of this is with a juxtaposition of a truism and a paraphrase. And the truism is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the paraphrase is lunacy is talking to the same people every 7 years and expecting a different answer to come out. There is an intriguing culture around structural funds across Europe, around the same people being engaged, and Liz has kind of hinted at, in some places in the system, at a culture of entitlement or an expectation that these funds will keep getting spent on the same things. But if they keep getting spent on the same things and the regulations shift from under our feet and Europe 2020 comes in and we need to start thinking about working much more closely with a range of partners, including the private sector and those who are really genuinely able to deliver that Europe 2020 agenda, there's a huge culture shift that has to happen. And that isn't only one way. We started this, as I said, as kind of almost with the two bookends, with the strategy and the very pragmatic sense of what we wanted to do, and have been filling in the gaps ever since. Part of that filling in the gaps was actually trying to engage a whole range of business organisations, and this is where the culture change really needs to be two-way. The Scottish Chambers of Commerce are the actual only ones that have engaged. So I'm rather hoping that Liz and her organisation will lead the others by example, and that over the course of this programme we will see more businesses getting engaged. It's an implicit part of the evidence base for the partnership agreement that, for example, on innovation, on competitiveness, on business growth, on making sure that SMEs and large companies are in a place to take on young apprentices or new employees, actually that isn't something that government can do. It's not something that a government agency can do. There's really only one type of place where that can happen, and that's in a business. So there are support structures that we can set up around that, but actually it has to come from businesses demanding that kind of service as well, and that is also about a culture change. So it's a huge challenge, I think, and one that we can constructively use this 7-year programme to try to address. And I would hope that when we come out at the other end of it, having focused on how you combine skills and innovation, business competitiveness, and making sure that you've got local businesses growing in local areas, perhaps to a point where they can come to the attention of being account managed and actually managing that relationship between the national agencies and the local authorities, and you will come out at the other end with a different culture, with businesses demanding more of the support, wanting to help direct it, understanding what it can do for their businesses, and therefore being in a better place to take on young people. And it's basically a little nirvana if it all happens, but hey, we can try.
Well, hope springs eternal. Hope springs eternal. I've got Leslie who wants to come in next, and then Hanzala. Linda, sorry. Mixed up my
okay,
Leslie's
I'm quite happy to let Leslie speak for me there. That's fine. I think Kat's nailed it, actually, when she talks about the culture shift in this whole debate here. I don't know if we collectively across Scotland, and certainly within the structural funds families, have quite appreciated how much of a culture shift we're going to be looking at here. There's been a completely different approach at Scottish level, certainly. We're looking at very new models of delivery, simplification, results-based focus, a whole host of different things, a whole host of different approaches from the Commission as well. And I think we need to really start realising just how much of a changing scenario we're talking about here. We were looking at the thematic objectives, and I think the key word that Liz mentioned there was interpretation. Certainly in the areas I'm more familiar with, in skills and innovation, I would very much welcome what's being said in the thematic objectives. I think the opportunities there for doing the right kind of things that Scotland needs to do, and the kind of things where we as players in the game, and talking in the broadest sense there, are able to and have the capacity to get in and deliver. But again, it's back to having a look at how we can interpret that at local level. Just to give one brief example here, we talked a little bit about skills, but looking more at innovation, there's some very, very good plans in the thematic objectives on setting up more innovation centres across Scotland. That's what we need to do. We need to raise our game when we're talking about the closer to market side of it. We're very, very good in Scotland at world-leading cutting-edge research. We're not awfully good at getting that to market. So the innovation centre proposals are, I think, very much the right approach to that. Again, though, we have to look at how we interpret that at local level, again in the Highlands and Islands specific issues, because we're dealing with more micro businesses. We're not looking at starting point, absolutely yes, the key growth sectors, and making sure that we're addressing these, and indeed trying to tie together what we're doing in skills with what we're doing in the innovation centres, so that it's all pointing in the same direction there. But we have to take account of local circumstances, again, similar to the previous discussions. Thank you.
You've got Hanzala next. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to pick up a couple of things from what Kat said and Liz Cameron said. And one of the things Liz is alluded to is that she's hopeful that we can have maybe one agency approach and maybe a place at the table. And you may be the table, but you might not get fed. The danger is that you might be the waiter at the table. So I think one agency also has an issue for me, and that is that there is a lack of competition then as well. And there's a danger that one agency can get complacent. So competition is healthy. I think we need some competition, but I take on board absolutely the issue about duplication. I think that was a very good point you raised, and we need to look at that and try to work towards reducing that. It's maybe not possible to eradicate that in the very near future, but I think we need to have a long-term goal in trying to do that, and your help could be quite helpful in that area. In terms of, one of the things that I've always felt is that there's a lot of passion in individuals, but when it comes to delivery, it becomes far more complicated in the sense that we have to take on everybody's aspirations, and a lot of people sometimes are pulling in different directions. That needs to be focused, and you've pointed that, you've alluded to that as well, and that's been good. But I think overall, I would like to think that this committee is going in the right direction, and the support from this committee to frontline organizations is crucial. We're making a lot of efforts to try and achieve that, but I think it's a two-way traffic. People have to engage with us as well, but not at the cost of other organizations, because if people feel that they may be endangered, then we will lose the goodwill of people out there. So we have to carry everybody with us, but of course we need to look at the duplication issue. That's always been an issue, and I think sometimes there may be an element of some percentage of duplication. But I think overall, I would like to think we're going in the right direction here. I think it's very helpful so far. Thank you.
Okay, Rod Campbell and then Leslie.
I just wanted to raise a couple of points. One was really what the view of the panel here was in terms of the approach to assisting youth employability, and secondly, whether the panel had a view on the composition of the proposed strategic delivery partnerships.
Okay, I think we've got Leslie and then Seraphin, and maybe if there's a couple of questions in there, if you could maybe try and address them all, if you don't mind. Thank you, Leslie.
Okay, going back to Patricia's original question about have we got the right set of thematic objectives, I think as we'd discussed at previous presentations at this committee, there was a lot of collaboration and discussion with a wide range of stakeholders when the Commission guidelines first came out, and they were very prescriptive in terms of what options were on the table. And we participated in a lot of discussion about what would be the best mix of thematic objectives for Scotland that would help us deliver what we felt could best be achieved with structural funds. And I think that's how we've ended up with the architecture that we've got. And I think, as other members have mentioned, we think that that's giving us the best flexibility within the guidelines and the regulations that are available. And it will be about how we use those thematic opportunities now. But it is also about this culture change and how we use the structural funds also to influence our delivery structures, and there's been quite a lot of discussion about that as part of the development of the interventions, and how do we work more effectively to deliver collaboratively as opposed to on an individual basis, and try and help remove some of this duplication and overlap. And there's a lot more discussion to take place on the detail, but I think we are definitely moving in the right direction in terms of using these funds as a lever to help that shift to happen. In terms of the youth employability issue, again, further discussions to have, but very much been a focus throughout the competitiveness discussions that I've been involved in, and I'm sure in the local delivery ones, is how we focus on that youth employability challenge, and how we use some of our young people in terms of encouraging mobility at the European level and helping to use those young people to create a more international and innovative perspective within our businesses when they come back. So there's some really interesting opportunities on the table that are being discussed as part of the development of these partnership approaches.
Okay, thank you very much. But Seraphin, and then Willie, and then Alan, and then Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Very quickly, coming some of the issues discussed this round. I mean, on the issue of local versus national, I wouldn't say local versus national, but let's say local and national. I mean, to be clear, local authorities support nationwide strategic priorities, strategic interventions, if you may. I think there's support of that, and that's why we have been negotiating and discussing with partners on this process for almost a couple of years. But that doesn't mean that that's incompatible with local determination. I think local authorities, as in some instances already in the current programme, want to have a bigger say possible in terms of delivering and defining what are the specific problems in their area and trying to find innovative approaches affecting themselves within a broad range of national, nationally agreed priorities. This is unsurprising considering the local agenda that COSLA is pursuing, and as you might know, we are pursuing further with the new local government vision for the future of local government in Scotland. So, of course, that's a tricky thing because we need to look at now how to look at the specific issues in terms of the implementation, in terms of audit, in terms of legal responsibilities that local authorities, CPPs, Business Gateway and other elements of the local community or the local government sector should comply with. That's a delicate thing, but I think that there's a question between achieving a balance between this small range of nationally agreed priorities and how they are implemented or pursued for their local level. On the same note, I mean, I think it's important that one of the things we are pushing forward in terms of ensuring that there is local determination, but at the same time consistency, is what we call the pipeline approach. We might see that in employability, where different sectors and agencies will contribute to different parts of the programme. We will definitely, I would expect, see that on the business support, where we will see a pipeline of interventions, hopefully, between different bodies. And the question is to see whether it's a proper demarcation, but at the same time complementarity, so the beneficiary ends up with a pipeline of support from the very, very out of the market to situations where actually, for instance, the job seeker or the business is already actually growing or has found a job, is to ensure that there is a consistency of support there. We will keen on youth employment. We will be keen that the programme that has been recently launched, the Youth Employment in Scotland, is developed further, and we are making representations for that ideas that I think have been looked at in the current programme and now that are pursued further in a more ambitious way in the next programming period. I believe that the fact that there is the Youth Employment Initiative that will benefit part of the country, the west part of the country, will also be helpful on that, and we have made a number of proposals to make sure that that tailored to the specific needs of that area, but at the same time makes sense with the related interventions taking place elsewhere of the country. And then, as I say, a lot of things will depend on difficult technical negotiations taking place in the coming weeks and months to avoid duplication. I'm just going to mention a very small example. On the one hand, on the rural programme, we have the LEADER programme, which is about local development interventions, a very small programme, but very supported by those who are part of that initiative. On the other hand, we got this community planning partnerships. We should see the ways that there's a proper interface between them to ensure that the interventions in the rural fund, the interventions in the structural funds, by the CPPs on the one end, by the local action groups in another end, are actually consistent, and the same way that the local development strategies developed in the rural funds are consistent, or at least inform the economic development, local economic development strategies at the local area, and vice versa, creating both complementarity but at the same time a sense of mutual accountability, which is at the bottom of what partnerships should be about. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. We've got 5 minutes left to cover a couple other points. So Willie, I've got Willie, Alan and Karen, and then I'll move to Claire to talk a wee bit about youth employment. If anybody's got anything in particular they want to add, then take your chance now, but please be short and sharp. Thank you. Sorry about that. Willie.
Thanks very much, Convener. I wonder if I could just pick up one of the themes, the ICT theme that's here, and probably ask Kat to further clarify for us just exactly what's in there and what the purposes are. You might recall from previous discussions here at this committee, Convener, some concern about the Connecting Europe Fund. I know it's a different fund, but which is dropping from 9 billion to 1 billion in terms of IT infrastructure. And there's been a bit of chat around the table today about rural issues and connectivity and broadband and so on. And just also to remind you and members, Convener, that the rural issue for broadband isn't just a North and a Highlands and Islands issue. It exists also in the south and west of Scotland and other remote communities. So really, what's in that theme? Does it cover IT infrastructure and connectivity issues or not? And if it doesn't, are we concerned, or what are we doing about trying to raise awareness about that whole connectivity issue and that huge drop, budget drop from 9 billion to 1 billion?
Kat. Okay, I suppose structural funds, and particularly the Regional Development Fund, which is likely to be in the region of 400 million euros, is never going to make up for 9 billion going missing across the European budget. As I was saying earlier, at the moment the Commission are not persuaded that the UK needs to spend any structural funds at all on ICT infrastructure. We don't agree with them, and we very vocally don't agree with them, and we are constructing what we hope is quite a convincing argument for inclusion in the partnership agreement, which we'll then have to negotiate with the Commission. And effectively what we're trying to do is to get them to buy the argument that yes, we should be allowed to spend both structural and rural funds on broadband provision as well. Alongside that, we're also considering a range of other digitally inspired initiatives, if you like. So one is around increasing advanced business usage, so actually using it as part of your business model. One is around using better technology in terms of cities management. So the Cities Alliance have come up with a proposal for how to do that. And the final one is around digital inclusion, making sure that people have the skills to access it, both for employability but also for access to services and remote rollout.
I'll do. No more.
Thank you. Alan, you wanted to come in and I think a few points.
Yes, it was on the youth employment subject. I mean, we only principally have the southwest of Scotland identified as qualifying for it, but we have other pockets of youth employment across the country. But this is becoming a far more sophisticated debate, and I'm not sure this has started to feature in yet, because there's been quite a lot of studies done on modern youth culture, and especially for disadvantaged people who are furthest away. You know, they've grown up in a completely different environment, which places them even further away. And the National Employability Forum, chaired by John Swinney, the Finance Secretary, is concerned that there is an oversupply of youth intervention, because, you know, as far as achieving a reduction in unemployment overall, a reduction in poverty, and achieving more social inclusion, which are key aims of this, we have got 4 times more people in Scotland over the age of 25 unemployed and excluded from the labour market than young people. So our priorities aren't lining up at this stage. Now, the only reason I mention this is from personal experience. If you can mix these young people with an older cohort at the same time, it's remarkable the success you can achieve with that more mature peer support.
Okay, I've got Karen. You were going to come in and some of the points as well, Karen.
If I may. Firstly, on the issue around the plethora of agencies providing business support, I think what we find locally is that, yes, whilst there are a range of organisations, actually what business want is a single point of contact, and that single point of contact can then utilise the expertise across a number of agencies, because I think in no one single agency is going to be the depth of and breadth of support required by business, but that single point of contact for business would be a really major step forwards. In terms of youth employability, there's a couple of points I was going to make there. Firstly, we do welcome the focus on youth employability, and certainly in North Ayrshire we are starting to see a significant decrease in the numbers of our 16 to 24-year-olds who are unemployed, and the growing flexibility that we're getting through the programmes, again, is welcome. However, I was also going to make the point that Alan has just made very well, which is that, yes, there is a significant youth employability issue, and in North Ayrshire we have one of the highest rates, so we're very acutely aware of that. But similarly, we have a not dissimilar ratio to the one that Alan's just indicated, so we need to be looking at the over 25s as well, and there are more limited funds at the moment for that age group.
And that very, very tidily puts us into the very last theme that we want to cover today, which, if we can do it very quickly, sorry Claire, but I know we've had a really good conversation this morning and it's been very helpful. But if you want to pick up some of the specific questions that the committee's got on the youth employment sector, and hopefully then we can get some feedback from that.
Yeah. Convener, I think a lot of the points have already been spoken about already at committee this morning, but some of the evidence did lead me to think that maybe we're not putting small to medium enterprises at the heart of what we're doing at the moment. And given that that's the focus for Europe, I thought that that was quite interesting, that we're talked a little bit about the culture change, but it doesn't seem to have gone far enough. And if I take the specific example of the Chambers of Commerce, in their submission, when they were talking about youth employment initiatives, they felt excluded from the process, and the delivery mechanism being suggested was through third sector organisations, and we've already talked about there being a plethora of those. So maybe in the general term is really asked the question, are we going far enough in terms of the engagement with the SMEs in specifically the area of youth employment, but also maybe a general point, if there is time for somebody to comment on whether or not the dynamism that's required from our SMEs in the whole process is actually, likely to be achieved, because from a Horizon 2020 conference, the big problem for the SMEs is the capacity to actually absorb the bureaucracy and the time delays and all these things. They just don't have that capacity. So are we making the sea change in dynamism that we need?
Liz, I see you nodding your head there. I wonder if you wanted to come in on that.
I absolutely agree. And I was actually you picked up a point that Kat made earlier on in terms of, this culture change is two-way, and I actually fully accept that in terms of business. But you've actually highlighted a point that, and I wrote down capacity building within the private sector organisations here, because if we take the other business organisations, I know from discussions, I've put the European funding on our agenda. We meet with a group of 6 every 3-4 months, and their view is, well, that we're not. It's of no interest, Liz. It's just you that's got that agenda, because as chambers we've been engaged, and I personally have been engaged in Europe, as I said, European funding for a long time. So that education, I think it's up to me and others in the business community to say, this is funding that's coming in that is supposedly focused on helping business competitiveness and supposedly focused on unemployment, and to pick all of these points up. So I think that I'm accepting that there is a need from our end about coming more to the table. But that said, you make it very difficult, and I smiled when you said about you'll end up being the waiter. Right now, how I'm feeling is that I'm the cleaner picking up the crumbs on a good day. So believe you me, that would be a promotion potentially for us in terms of our, positioning and decision-making ability around that table. So, I think that I'm listening to the youth unemployment agenda quite keen here, because we talk about skills, and it's a big issue for Scottish business. If we have achieved what we set out to do for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years with European funding, why do we have a situation where we've got a growing percentage of individuals that are further away from the job market? We can't employ them. And, yes, we've had a rough, 4 years in terms of recession. We're riding that wave now. And the other point is that why do we also have skill shortages? Why do we also have young people that are picking disciplines and career opportunities that we don't have to give? The mechanism and the delivery model is fundamentally flawed. I don't know where to start with it, because it's so vast. I've attempted 3 times to map out the skills and education agenda. And bear in mind, I'm not a public body. We've tried an attempt to do that. So we talk about this culture. I'm talking about absolutely changing the model of how we deliver. It's not just the, let's tweak around the edges because we've got new thematic themes coming. This is a fundamental of changing our delivery model, because if we don't, we will sit here in the next 5 years with the same issues. And it is about business helping collaboratively, in a collaborative way, to help with public sector. So I'm sorry. And as a committee, it's my first time I've actually been here. I've enjoyed it. Don't know, you've enjoyed it. I'll answer your question later. But please, as a committee, do not let go of that tail, because we've started on a journey here. The real issue is the how, and if we get that wrong, which it has certain paths that could go the wrong way, it's up to the the committee, hopefully, to be questioning at every avenue. How are we doing that? What's new? What's really new in terms of delivery on the ground, or is it just more of the same? Sorry.
Okay, a very, very power. I know that other people want to get in, but I think we've really ran over our time on this one. I think Kat knows very well that this committee has a very strong grip of that tail. We don't intend to let go of it. But can I thank you all for your evidence today? I think there's a few points that we've not managed to cover, so we may have some communications with you in writing just to firm up some of those points. And if there's anything that you felt that you didn't get across this morning, please don't even hesitate to get in touch with the clerks with the points you want to contribute to this debate, because it's very important that we hear what you've got to say. That's the only way we can form our opinions, and it's certainly the only way that the Scottish Government can take forward the Scottish chapter. So thank you very, very much for your participation today, and we look forward to working with you all in the future, including you, Liz. Thank you. And we're going to move on quite swiftly to agenda item 3, which is our Brussels Bulletin. Members will see from our Brussels Bulletin that it's pretty comprehensive this month, that there's a number of questions that we have asked and a number of responses that we've had, and there is a number of actions that we are hoping to get your agreement on this morning. So if you can have a quick look at the Brussels Bulletin and come back to me on where you think we should be responding. I think we need to go through each one and say which one. Claire very, very helpfully has put together in bold some of the recommendations. So if you want to go through them one by one. It's on the front page of the Brussels Bulletin, and we've got a number of things that there's proposals to follow up on. Comments, questions? Patricia.
To colleagues, because I've come to this after the committee's been considering it for a while, but in relation to the UK Government proposed modern slavery bill, and I have to say I hate the title right from the start, I just wondered whether, when we got details from the Deputy First Minister about the risk assessment in relation to the Commonwealth Games, what that actually said, what kind of risk assessment there was, because it strikes me that, if we think the Commonwealth Games is going to be one of the big focuses, and I think we do, for trafficking, then clearly there's not going to be a bill through in time to help to make a difference there, or to be able to legislate anyone found to be doing that. So I was really just wondering where we were with that particular aspect of it in terms of the assessment.
Yeah, it's a very valid question, and Hansala pursued that very effectively with the Cabinet Secretary when she was at committee before, and Clark will just inform me that we have written to them and we're looking for a response on the risk assessment, because that was specifically the line that Hansala had taken that day. So definitely on it, and we can maybe chase up the response to see where we're at with it, Patricia.
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
Claire.
Yeah, I thought the paper was very, very helpful. I absolutely think we should follow through on the anti-trafficking agenda. The IT infrastructure investment has been hugely prominent in the work of the committee, and I think that that's very important as well. I actually think they all have merit. However, I do wonder whether now is the time to hand back, if we can, the foreign language learning to Education and Culture Committee. Now that it's embedded and we've done the initial inquiry on it, I still think that should be followed through, but I wonder if that's maybe something that committee should now be picking up, because I do appreciate how tight our time is at the moment in this area. We don't want to take anything away from them as well. That's a good idea.
Okay, excellent idea. Rod?
I wasn't sure, just what Claire said on the foreign language point, I would have So just see the Scottish Government's 6-monthly report in December and then take a decision from there. Myself, but...
You're just echoing what Jenny just said in my ear.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, point well made.
Recommendations all seem to be kind of sensible to me.
Okay. Billy.
Thanks very much, Convener. Yeah, fully behind our keeping our eyes focused on the IT infrastructure investment issue, and I know it will be of interest to other colleagues in other committees, so I think very much like to keep a hold of that, a close look at that, because there's some comments in the bulletin coming up if we're looking at the detail that really surprised me about what their attitude to this is, and it's really not a clear picture at all, Convener, and I think we could do with some help on this matter.
Okay. Jamie?
I'd just like to emphasise what Willie Coffey said. I mean, what came up from Kat Feldinger there about Brussels not taking on board that the UK need any money for digital infrastructure, I thought was a staggering thing. I mean, I understand her reluctance to say it too, but the point is, if you live in a not spot in Scotland, in a digital age, your equality goes out the window in terms of everything. And I think this has got to be a point we've got to ram home at every opportunity.
We're going to have in the private session a bit of a review of the evidence we heard today, and we can pick up that point at that and see where we want to go with it. But I think you're absolutely right.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. Hanzala.
Yeah, Chair, I'm wanting to make a similar point, but go a stage further and to say that we should actually establish a point that we discuss this issue at every committee meeting till such times as we actually succeed in getting it. Otherwise, we're not going to get it. I mean, it's over a year now we've been discussing this, and we've not got anywhere with it, and that's not good enough. So I think what we need to do is we need to discuss this at each meeting to measure exactly where we are, so that we can be focused in on it and make sure that we pursue it with more vigor than we have, because this is too important for us, not only from an industrial point of view, but also from education, social, and industrial point of view. So I think it's just too important to just simply talk about it. So so what I'm suggesting that we actually have this as an item in each meeting, and we have an explanation of who's done what since the last meeting, so we progress this more vigorously than we have done up until now.
Right.
Just one to, I think it's quite a good idea, but I think maybe we'd get more benefit perhaps from an evidence session on this theme, Convener, because we could go on forever asking the same questions at all the meetings and keeping it on the agenda. Maybe an evidence session on this theme to get some key players together who actually know what's going on with the IT infrastructure issue and so on, and how it affects member states and the rural communities. That would be very, very welcome, I think.
Okay. Let me just, because we've got a 6-monthly update coming from the Scottish Government at the beginning of December, and I think maybe from the conversation we had at this committee that we maybe post a wee letter to the Scottish Government now to say in that 6-monthly update we want, quite a detailed progress on what's happening with that, and it'll allow us then to get it onto the agenda to discuss maybe in December when we get the update from the Scottish Government, and that just gives it a wee bit more a better structured focus if people are happy with that.
Chair, I'm happy with that, but I also strongly feel that it should actually be an agenda item for us, because we've not succeeded for over a year. And quite frankly, there's no point in discussing issues if we're not going to succeed in dealing with them. I think this is an issue that's just too important for us to just simply talk about it. If it's an agenda item, it means that we as a committee are going to be focused, and we as a committee will then pursue it in a manner that we will want to see progress meeting on meeting, and hopefully we will get somewhere.
Patricia.
I don't disagree with anything you said, Chair, but I was just going to say that I think within the last 6 months, perhaps, one of our other committees in the Parliament has actually undertaken quite a big piece of work on that whole issue. So I'm not sure it's actually for us to go down into the detail of what's where and how's what. I mean, our focus has to be about how Europe supports what we're doing. So it may be that we would want to review what's been done by the other committees before we decide that we want to go down that.
Okay, well, let's do that then. Let's see what the other committee's doing and come back, and we can have a discussion about it, and the clerks will do a bit of work on it for our next meeting. I'm going to wrap up the Brussels Bulletin right now. If anybody else has got anything specific, are they happy for it to be passed to subject committees for their...
Just to say, I know with interest that the quotas in boardrooms is back on the agenda.
Excellent. I did as well. Thank you very much for that, and we'll move on to agenda item 4, which we agreed at the beginning of the session to take in private. So I'm going to take a brief a break in the meeting right now, and if we can be back in our seats in a few minutes. Thank you.